could be a threat. The impact of this policy is in more and more areas they think children will be a threat. That they will turn to massacre children as a legitimate tactic to do what they need to do because they see children as a particular threat. No thanks. I will look at 3 issues. First, I will look at control of the newly created militias and look at control of children and child soldiers in general. Second, I want to look at the issue of reintegration into society. Those are the two big issues. So let's talk about the issue of control. Let's say that the United Nations or other groups of countries decide to train militias. Why would those militias remain under the control of the US or the French or the British? Presumably, as Daniel and Jordan tell you, those states won't still be around in those very areas. What is far more likely is you arm a group of people who hate a different group. Look what happens in Nepal, where you have reprisal killings by children continuously, where some children's parents are killed and they were to join one faction, either the Maoists or the government. That exact same thing might well happen here. A child whose one parent ends up being killed in a particular village will now go on massive reprisals or being very, very willing to be influenced by charismatic leaders, as Maggie points to you, from particular other factions overall. That's massively damaging because you don't get the kinds of control. You just get you get a perpetuation of militias, you get the exact same kinds of militias, just more of them, but now they're armed by the United Nations and trained by the forces they want. We don't understand how in the vast majority of circumstances that could possibly be a better idea. Further, what is never responded to is inherently with child soldiers you have greater risks of atrocity. One of the major reasons why we think there has to be a ban on child soldiers is derivative, because allowing there to be child soldiers increases the chances of other kinds of war crimes. Matthew looks at the psychology of child soldiers. When children have been asked to shoot and kill, they're institutionalized into environments where killing is accepted, and what they have to do, they lose their very sense of morality and that kind of bar which would otherwise prevent war crimes occurring overall. We think at that point, the increased chance of war crimes, exactly as you see in places like Sierra Leone, exactly as you see in Uganda, simply perpetuate. That was never responded to, where we said children should never be involved in warfare to the extent we can prevent it. Let's move on to the issue of reintegration. There's Jack.
How effective was the international ban at preventing all of those child soldiers you talked about?
The international ban was never fully successful. I don't think that's particularly relevant for a couple reasons. First, the proposition creates more. Further, we think at the margin it does have some impact. Look, for instance, at Afghanistan. Look for a country like Russia, for instance. These are countries which do suffer manpower shortages in their military. The fact that it's an international ban and they care about international legitimacy presumably prevents them in those circumstances from having those circumstances. I might add, if they do go down that road, it is a major case shift. Further onto this is the issue of reintegration into society. When we hear Daniel stand up and he says, what's really important to society in the future is security, we're willing to accept that. We think security can come from multiple different means. But we also think what's important for society years later is whether or not there will be individuals within that particular society which can be integrated into society. First, notice empirically, when you look at conflicts like in Angola, you look at conflicts in places like Sierra Leone, one of the major problems has been the reintegration of large numbers of child soldiers into that community. Why? Because child soldiers have been institutionalized into particular ways of thinking. Violence is seen as a legitimate tool for them to get their way. That makes it far more likely that after the conflict is over, they turn to violence. Further, they've been deprived of particular skills and only being the skills of crime and violence, the skills of being able to shoot individuals. What does this mean? It makes it far less likely that when you have a post-conflict situation that they're able to find themselves in productive employment. They instead turn to things like criminal networks. They turn to crime as the only way in which that they can use the skills they currently have.
The alternative here is leaving in power and control the adult militias that are already committing war crimes. We think we form groups as self-defense groups who are meant to protect them. They stand a lot less better chance than groups that are already going around and committing war crimes of doing so.
No. That is not, and that is very much not the only alternative. Even if you believe that we can't use peacekeeping troops in those circumstances, you could arm different individuals who were children, particularly given the fact, as we've told you continuously, that it is children who are particularly problematic situation. As I'm talking about right now, because they're far more likely when they are deprived of skills overall to turn to the only skills they have, that is of crime. They don't have otherwise employable skills. If you look at places like Rwanda and Angola, one of the major reasons why you have crime is because you have individuals who have skills, who are former soldiers, who have no other options available to them. In that situation, you have a massive increase in violence in a post-conflict situation. When it would simply cannot function because of those huge amounts of crime which occur. We think when you look at situations of child soldiers, you do have to care about what the overall outcome will be. So what have we told you? We tell you there are more child soldiers irrespective of which of the prop cases I assume when you have the ship you're going to take. Second, we tell you child soldiers are inherently bad. It doesn't matter who controls it. Militias probably will control it. We tell you reintegration in society is near impossible. Empirically this is true. We're very happy to oppose.
Moving on then to the second proposition, spokesperson Jeff Watson.
Come on, Jeff.
Redefine.
Nice.
Counter-pro.
Thanks, guys. We're going to talk to you about one thing, essentially. We're going to say that simply the number of child soldiers is not the only important consideration. And another important consideration can be the experience that those child soldiers have, and why we think that the ban on child soldiers causes further brutalisation of those individuals who have already become them, fails to prevent this, but encourages more brutalised tactics and prevents the giving of aid and reintegration. That's completely consistent with opening gov, even if not, like, don't care. First of all, we have 3 points of rebuttal, 2 of which are going to support opening gov's case. The first one, they say we are creating more, right? We think this is obviously a comparative. In Sudan, children are already killed unless they could become child soldiers. The same in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The difference is under our model, these children have some ability to defend themselves in situations where there is no adult population able to do that, right? On our comparative, you provide a better possible future for these children because guess what? Militias are coming either way, right? And what's going to happen on their side of the house is extreme brutalisation of child soldiers. On ours, we can at least get some benefits. Second of all, we recognise this might not necessarily happen everywhere, but we recognise that this can lead to an amelioration of those tactics, as I'll talk to you about in my extension. Second, they say, why do these groups necessarily remain under our control? Well, often if you're arming somebody, you're able to maintain control of them because they're reliant on you for those kinds of arms. Second of all, because we're able to influence the amount of training and the kinds of training that they receive. We're quite happy to say that training from a United Nations or from a United States camp could provide certain levels of education and the ability to reintegrate back into society, which isn't going to be provided by the Janjaweed, Madam Speaker. In that circumstance, you do have a better situation. You see a qualitative difference in the training that you are given because these individuals are no longer forced into committing war crimes so that they are complicit and therefore unable to tell what happened to them, and instead are simply trying to defend themselves from this kind of brutalisation, go away, Harish. Finally, we get this idea of like the importance of condemnation. We see that one of the worst problems when a vulnerable person has been forced into a given situation, like we see with child soldiers, like we see with victims of domestic violence, is that it's constantly